I was 7 when my father vanished. Not the dramatic kind of vanishing you see in movies, with ransom notes or signs of struggle. He just disappeared. One ordinary Tuesday morning, his truck was found abandoned on the side of Highway 16, keys still in the ignition. His wallet sitting on the passenger seat. That's all we got, an empty truck and a lifetime of questions. My name is Harper, and that morning changed everything. I remember standing in our small living room, clutching my teddy bear while 2 police officers spoke to my mother in hushed tones. Mom's face remained composed, but her hands kept fidgeting with her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd never seen before. "Mrs. Quinn will keep investigating, but right now there's no evidence of foul play," one officer said, his notepad already halfway into his pocket. The other one kept glancing at me with that awful mix of pity and discomfort adults get around children in crisis. Mom nodded mechanically, thanking them as they left. The moment the door closed, she slid down against it, silent tears streaming down her face. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat next to her and held her hand. We stayed like that for what felt like hours. The next few weeks were a blur of whispered phone calls and concerned neighbors bringing casseroles we barely touched. Mom threw herself into work, picking up extra shifts at the diner and starting a cleaning job on weekends. I learned to pack my own lunch and set my alarm clock. "Your mother's so strong," people would say, their voices dripping with sympathy. But I saw how she'd pause sometimes, staring at Dad's coffee mug still hanging on its hook in the kitchen. Or how she'd wake up in the middle of the night to check his side of the closet, as if his clothes might have mysteriously reappeared. One evening, about 3 months after he disappeared, I found Mom in the garage, sitting in Dad's old workshop. She was holding his favorite wrench, running her fingers over the worn handle. "Harper, sweetie," she said, noticing me hovering in the doorway. "Come here." She patted the workbench beside her, and I climbed up. "You know your daddy loved us very much, right?" I nodded, even though I wasn't so sure anymore. "If he loved us, why didn't he come back?" "Sometimes." Mom paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes people leave, and we might never know why. But that doesn't mean it's our fault. You understand." I didn't, not really, but I nodded again because it seemed like what she needed. "We're going to be okay," she said more to herself than to me. "We've got each other, and that's what matters." That night, I overheard her on the phone with Aunt Sarah. "The bank called again," Mom whispered. "I don't know how much longer I can keep up with the mortgage. And these medical bills from his last checkup." I had no idea he'd canceled his life insurance. I lay in bed, clutching my teddy bear tighter, trying to make sense of it all. Dad had always seemed so happy, so present. He'd swing me around in the backyard, calling me his little monkey. He'd spend hours teaching me about tools in his workshop, letting me hold the flashlight while he fixed things. How could someone just walk away from their life without a trace? Years later, I'd learned that the police found something else in his truck that day, something they didn't tell us about initially. A receipt from a gas station in Oregon, dated 2 days after he disappeared. He hadn't vanished into thin air after all. He'd chosen to leave. But that morning, watching those police officers walk away, I was just a confused 7-year-old girl, unaware that this was only the beginning of a pattern that would shape my entire life. People leaving, secrets unraveling, and the constant struggle to keep myself from falling apart in the aftermath. 11 years passed in a blur of late-night study sessions, part-time jobs, and my mother's unwavering determination to give me a normal life. But nothing prepares you for hearing the word cancer in a sterile doctor's office. Watching your mother's face as she processes the news with the same quiet strength she showed the day Dad left. I was 18, fresh out of high school and ready to start college on a scholarship when Mom's persistent cough turned into something more sinister. Stage 3 lung cancer. She'd never even smoked. "It's just another bump in the road, honey," Mom said, squeezing my hand as we left the hospital. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "We've handled worse, but this was different." The medical bills started piling up faster than the autumn leaves in our yard. I'd come home from my evening shift at the campus coffee shop to find Mom hunched over spreadsheets at the kitchen table, calculator in hand, trying to make impossible numbers work. "You should defer college for a year," she suggested one evening, her voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. The chemotherapy had taken her hair, but not her spirit. "Focus on work, save some money." I shook my head, already knowing where this conversation was heading. Not happening. I can handle both. Harper. Mom, please. I pulled out the chair next to her, sitting down. You've spent the last 11 years making sure I had every opportunity possible. Don't ask me to give up now. She started crying then, silent tears rolling down her hollow cheeks. I'm supposed to take care of you, not the other way around. I grabbed her hand, noticing how thin her fingers had become. We take care of each other. That's what we do. The next few months became a brutal routine. Classes in the morning, hospital visits in the afternoon, work in the evening, and studying late into the night. I learned to function on 4 hours of sleep and vending machine coffee. My scholarship covered tuition, but everything else, the medical bills, the mortgage, the groceries, came down to careful juggling and prayer. Then came the night that changed everything. I was closing up the coffee shop when my phone rang. Mom had collapsed at home. Our elderly neighbor found her when she went to drop off some soup. The hospital corridors seemed endless as I ran toward her room. The doctor's words blurred together. Complications, pneumonia, critical condition. I stood there, watching the machines breathe for her, remembering all the times she'd been strong for me. You should rest, a nurse said gently, touching my arm. She's stable for now. I shook my head. I need to be here when she wakes up. But she didn't wake up. 3 days later, I had to make the decision no 18-year-old should have to make. The doctor explained that her organs were failing, that the cancer had spread more aggressively than they'd thought, that keeping her on life support would only prolong the inevitable. She left this for you, the nurse said, handing me an envelope after it was over. Inside was a letter, written in Mom's careful handwriting. My dearest Harper, if you're reading this, I'm so sorry I couldn't be stronger for you. But you need to know something. You were never the one who needed to be strong. You were my strength all along. Every time I wanted to give up, every time the weight felt too heavy, I'd look at you and find the courage to keep going. Don't let this break you. Don't let anything break you. You're a Quinn woman, and we bend but never break. All my love, Mom. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into my pocket. The world felt impossibly large and empty, but I could still hear Mom's voice in my head. We bend but never break. That night, sitting alone in our too-quiet house, I made 2 promises to myself. First, I would finish college, no matter what it took. And second, I would never let anyone make me feel as helpless as I felt in that hospital corridor. Little did I know, both these promises would be tested sooner than I expected. I met Ryan in my advanced economics class, 6 months after Mom died. He sat next to me on a rainy Tuesday, offered me a coffee, and somehow made me laugh for the first time since the funeral. It wasn't love at first sight, more like recognition. Here was someone else who understood what it meant to navigate life's unexpected turns. You're taking 18 credits and working 2 jobs? He asked one evening as we studied in the library. That's insane, Harper. I shrugged, highlighting another passage in my textbook. Not much choice. The scholarship only covers tuition. There's always a choice. He closed my book, forcing me to look at him. Let me help. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's... He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustrated. It's me caring about someone who's working herself to death. That's when my scholarship renewal letter arrived. Or rather, the rejection letter. I stood in my tiny studio apartment, reading and rereading the words until they blurred together. Without the scholarship, there was no way I could continue. All of Mom's sacrifices, all my promises, they'd amount to nothing. Move in with me, Ryan said when I told him. We were sitting in his car outside my apartment, rain drumming on the roof. My roommate's graduating early. You can take his room, split the rent. It's cheaper than this place. Ryan, just listen, he interrupted. You're brilliant, Harper. You're going to graduate and become some hotshot financial analyst, and I'll get to say I knew you when. But you can't do it if you're sleeping 3 hours a night and living on ramen. I stared out the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. Why are you doing this? Because someone should. His voice softened. Because you've been carrying everything alone for so long, you've forgotten you don't have to. 2 weeks later, I moved into Ryan's apartment. It was bigger than mine, closer to campus, and somehow everything started feeling manageable. Ryan cooked while I studied. We split the bills. For the first time since Mom died, I felt like I could breathe. But then came the night that changed everything. I was working late at my campus job when Ryan called, panic in his voice. Harper, we need you. There's been an accident. I found him in the emergency room, blood on his shirt, looking shell-shocked. It's my dad, he explained. Heart attack. Mom's with him now. I stayed with Ryan all night, watching him pace the waiting room, making coffee runs, holding his hand when the doctor finally came out. His father survived, but barely. That's when I met Evelyn Mitchell for the first time. She swept into the waiting room like a hurricane in designer clothes, her mascara perfectly intact despite the circumstances. Her eyes landed on our joined hands, then on my worn jeans and coffee-stained sweater. You must be Harper, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Ryan's friend. Girlfriend, Ryan corrected, squeezing my hand. She's been here all night, Mom. How sweet. Her tone suggested it was anything but. Richard's asking for you, darling. Family only right now. I felt Ryan tense beside me. Harper is family. Of course she is. Evelyn's smile turned sharp. But perhaps she should go home and change? We wouldn't want the hospital staff thinking we're… Well, the implication hung in the air. I stood up, gathering my things. But Ryan caught my arm. Stay, he whispered. Please. I looked at him, then at Evelyn, who was watching us with calculated interest. In that moment, I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach turn, a flash of the same controlling nature that had driven my father away, that had made my mother doubt herself for years. It's okay, I said, squeezing Ryan's hand. Go be with your dad. I'll come back later. As I walked out of the hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just glimpsed my future, a future where every decision, every moment would be scrutinized and judged by Evelyn Mitchell. I should have listened to that instinct. Should have run while I still could. But I was too focused on not losing another person I loved to see the warning signs right in front of me. Ryan proposed on graduation day, right after we received our diplomas. It wasn't a grand gesture, just us sitting on the steps of the economics building where we first met. The ring was simple, elegant, exactly what I would have chosen myself. I know it's not much, he said, looking nervous. But I promise, Harper, I'll spend my life making sure you never feel alone again. I said yes without hesitation. After 2 years together, Ryan felt like home. Steady, reliable, everything my father wasn't. We planned a small wedding, something we could afford on our entry-level salaries. That's when Evelyn stepped in. Darling, she said during what was supposed to be a casual dinner at her house, you simply can't get married at the courthouse. What would everyone think? Ryan squeezed my hand under the table. Mom, we've talked about this. We want something simple. Simple doesn't mean cheap. She sipped her wine, eyes fixed on me. Unless, of course, Harper's uncomfortable with accepting help from family. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest. We appreciate the offer, but I insist. Her tone left no room for argument. Consider it my wedding gift. After all, you're going to be a Mitchell now. Ryan beamed, missing the way his mother's words made me flinch. I wasn't becoming a Mitchell. I was still a Quinn, my mother's daughter. But I stayed quiet, not wanting to spoil his happiness. The wedding spiraled into something unrecognizable. Evelyn took over, booking an expensive venue, ordering custom everything. Each time I tried to object, she'd already paid for something else, making it impossible to back out without seeming ungrateful. The night before the wedding, I found myself alone in the bridal suite, staring at my reflection. The dress was beautiful, and completely not me. Everything about this wedding felt like a performance for Evelyn's social circle. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. You okay? You seemed off at the rehearsal dinner. I started typing I'm fine but deleted it. Instead, I wrote, remember when we were kids and promised to tell each other the truth, no matter what? Her response came quickly. What's really going on, Harper? Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Evelyn swept in, carrying a small box. I have something for you, she said, opening it to reveal a pearl necklace. It's been in the Mitchell family for generations. Every bride has worn it. The pearls gleamed in the soft light, beautiful and suffocating. I was planning to wear my mother's locket. Evelyn's smile tightened. Oh, sweetie, That old thing? This is your chance to start fresh, to become part of a real family. The words hit like a physical blow. I had a real family. Of course you did. Her tone was patronizing. But let's be honest. A father who abandoned you, a mother who couldn't even afford proper health care. Ryan's offering you something better. Don't cling to the past. I stood up, hands shaking. My mother worked herself to death to give me a future. Don't you dare. And now you have one, she interrupted smoothly. Thanks to my son. Just remember that. After she left, I sat on the floor, clutching my mother's locket. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger in her expensive dress and perfect makeup. Mom's words echoed in my head, "Don't let anything break you." My phone buzzed again. "Zoe, whatever you decide, I've got your back." I took a deep breath and made a decision. I couldn't stop this wedding without hurting Ryan, but I could hold on to who I was. Tomorrow, I would walk down the aisle wearing my mother's locket, not Evelyn's pearls. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt like drawing a line in the sand. What I didn't know then was that this moment, this choice between my identity and Evelyn's vision of who I should be, was just the beginning of a war I wasn't prepared to fight. 3 years into our marriage, the cracks started showing. While my career in financial analysis took off, Ryan seemed content working retail at the mall, picking up occasional shifts and spending more time at his mother's house than ours. I got the promotion, I announced over dinner one night, unable to contain my excitement. Senior analyst position, with a significant raise. Ryan pushed his food around his plate. That's great. Great? Ryan, this is huge. We can finally start saving for. Mom thinks we should look at houses in Oakwood Heights, he interrupted, not meeting my eyes. Sit down, my faculties. Oakwood Heights was where Evelyn lived, all massive houses and manicured lawns. We can't afford Oakwood Heights. With your new salary, even with the raise, those houses are way beyond our means. I tried keeping my voice level. Besides, our apartment is fine. Fine isn't good enough anymore. He finally looked up. Mom says people are starting to talk. People? You mean your mother's country club friends? The words came out sharper than intended. Since when do we care what they think? Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. Evelyn, right on cue. I watched him answer, watched his posture change as he spoke to her. When had my confident, supportive husband become this person who couldn't make a decision without his mother's input? The next day, I came home to find Ryan and Evelyn in our living room, surrounded by real estate brochures. Harper, darling. Evelyn's smile was razor sharp. I found the perfect house for you. 5 bedrooms, pool, guest house, room to grow. We don't need 5 bedrooms. I dropped my briefcase, exhausted from a day of meetings. And we definitely don't need a guest house. Don't be silly. Every Mitchell lives in Oakwood Heights. It's tradition. I'm not. I caught myself seeing Ryan's pleading look. We need to discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss, Ryan said, his voice taking on that familiar tone he used when parroting his mother's words. I already put in an offer. The room went silent. You what? It's a seller's market, Evelyn chimed in. We had to move quickly. Don't worry about the down payment, I'm handling it. My hands started shaking. Ryan, can we talk? Alone. In our bedroom, I tried staying calm. You made an offer on a house without discussing it with me? Mom says. I don't care what your mother says. The words exploded out of me. This is our life, our finances. You can't just. What's the problem? He threw his hands up. You got this big promotion, we're moving up in the world. Isn't this what you wanted? What I wanted, I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. What I wanted was a partner who could make decisions with me, not for me. What I wanted was to build our life together, not live the life your mother designed. You're being dramatic. Mom's just trying to help. Help. I pulled out my laptop, opened our banking app. Look at this. Really look. Even with my raise, that house would eat up everything we make. One emergency and we'd be underwater. Mom said she'd help if. And there it is. I closed the laptop. More strings for your mother to pull. When did you stop being the man I married and become her puppet? His face hardened. At least my mother's still around to help. The words hit like a physical blow. I stepped back, remembering my mother's last days, how she'd fought to give me independence, not control. Your mother's not helping, Ryan. She's buying your obedience. And apparently, it's pretty cheap. I grabbed my keys and jacket, needing to escape before I said something unforgivable. As I passed the living room, Evelyn called out, "Don't be difficult, dear. This is for the best." I paused at the door, thinking of all the times my mother had taught me to stand my ground. "No, Evelyn. This is for your best." And that's not the same thing at all. Walking to my car, I called Zoe. "Remember when you said you had a spare room if I ever needed it?" "Always," she answered without hesitation. "How soon?" I looked back at our apartment, where Ryan stood watching from the window. "I don't know yet. But soon." The call came at 3 in the morning. Richard Mitchell had suffered another heart attack, worse than the first. I woke to find Ryan already dressed, keys in hand. "I have to go," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Dad needs me." I nodded, still half asleep. "Of course. Let me get dressed." "No." His voice was firm. "I need to do this alone." That was 6 months ago. Now I stood in our empty house, the house I'd warned him we couldn't afford, staring at another past due notice. Ryan had quit his job to help care for his father, leaving me to shoulder our mounting debts alone. My phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. "Family dinner tonight." No excuses. Family dinner. Her new Sunday tradition, where she'd spend hours listing everything Ryan had sacrificed for his father, while pointedly ignoring the fact that I was working 60-hour weeks to keep us afloat. "I can't make it," I texted back. "Deadline at work." Her response was immediate. "Ryan needs your support. Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word echoed in my head as I drove to their house that evening. The same words she'd used when I suggested Ryan look for part-time work. When I questioned her decision to hire round-the-clock nurses we couldn't afford, when I dared to mention our growing credit card debt. Ryan met me at the door, looking more like his mother's son than my husband. "You're late." "Traffic." I followed him inside, where Evelyn was holding court in the living room, surrounded by medical bills and insurance forms. "Harper, darling." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We need to discuss the house." "What about it?" "Well," she paused, examining her manicure. "Given the circumstances, it might be best to sell it." The room tilted slightly. "Sell our house." "Ryan needs to be here full-time," she continued. "And since you're so concerned about money." "I'm concerned about surviving," I corrected. "We're drowning in debt because." "Because you lack faith," she interrupted. "Family takes care of family. Ryan understands that." I looked at my husband, but he was studying the carpet. "Ryan, is this what you want?" "It makes sense," he mumbled. "Dad needs me here." "And what about what I need?" The words came out before I could stop them. "I've been killing myself trying to keep us above water while you." "While I what?" His head snapped up. "While I take care of my dying father. I'm sorry we can't all be cold and practical like you." The accusation hit like a slap. "Cold?" "I watched my mother die alone because we couldn't afford proper care. Don't you dare call me cold." "That's different," Evelyn interjected smoothly. "We're not going to abandon Richard the way your father abandoned." "Stop." My voice shook. "Just stop." I walked to the window, watching the expensive landscaping blur through sudden tears. Behind me, I heard Ryan sigh. "Maybe Mom's right," he said quietly. "Maybe we should sell the house. You could get an apartment closer to work, and I could stay here." And there it was. The final thread snapping. "You've already moved out, haven't you?" I turned to face him. "Your clothes, your things, they're all here." His silence was answer enough. "Harper," Evelyn started, but I held up a hand. "No. You win, Evelyn. You finally have him exactly where you want him. Dependent, compliant, just like when he was a child." I pulled my house keys from my purse. "Let them fall onto the coffee table." "But I won't stay to watch." "Don't be dramatic," Ryan protested. "This is temporary." "No, it's not." I met his eyes one last time. "This is who you choose to be. And I choose not to be part of it." Walking out of that house felt like leaving my mother's hospital room all over again. That same hollow ache. That same knowledge that nothing would ever be the same. But this time, the person I was losing had chosen to leave. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from my bank. "Insufficient funds for mortgage payment. Final notice." I started the engine, wondering how I'd ended up here, homeless, nearly bankrupt and completely alone. Again. Richard Mitchell died on a Tuesday, exactly like my father had disappeared. But this time, I wasn't a helpless child watching my world collapse. I was in my office when Ryan's text arrived. Dad's gone. Need you home now. Home. I stared at the word, wondering if he meant our house or his mother's. It didn't matter. I'd lost both. I found them in the kitchen of our house, Ryan and Evelyn huddled over papers spread across the counter I'd picked out 3 years ago. They didn't hear me come in. The house should sell quickly, Evelyn was saying. The market's hot, and with your father's life insurance. What house? My voice made them both jump. Our house. Ryan at least had the decency to look guilty. Harper, I can explain. Explain what? How you're selling our house without telling me. Or how you're counting money your father hasn't even been dead a day. Don't be crude, Evelyn snapped. We're being practical. Something you claim to understand. I moved closer, scanning the papers. Property listings, bank statements, and is that my signature? Ryan paled. I had to, the bank needed. You forged my signature? The room tilted dangerously. On what? Just some paperwork to get the sale moving. Evelyn waved dismissively. Really, Harper, you're making this more dramatic than necessary. Get out. My voice was surprisingly steady. Both of you, get out of my house. Your house. Evelyn laughed. Darling, who do you think has been making the payments these past 6 months? I have. Every single one. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. Want to see the transfers? The overtime hours? The credit card debt I took on while your son played dutiful caretaker. Mom's been helping, Ryan protested. She's been lying. I met Evelyn's eyes. Haven't you? There's no life insurance, is there? The slight twitch in her perfectly composed face told me everything. Richard canceled it years ago. I continued, watching her mask slip. Just like my father did. You've been promising Ryan money that doesn't exist. How dare you? I work in financial analysis, remember? The job you thought was beneath your precious son? I know how to read between the lines. I turned to Ryan. She's broke. Has been for years. All those country club memberships, designer clothes, it's all smoke and mirrors. That's ridiculous, Ryan stammered. Mom. But Evelyn's silence was damning. Get out, I repeated. You have 30 minutes to take what's yours. After that, I'm calling the police about the forgery. You wouldn't, Evelyn hissed. I pulled out my mother's locket, the one I'd worn instead of Evelyn's pearls at my wedding. My mother taught me to stand my ground. Your son might have forgotten who he is, but I haven't forgotten who I am. Ryan, Evelyn turned to her son. Are you going to let her speak to me this way? I watched my husband, the boy who'd offered me coffee on a rainy Tuesday, the man who'd promised to never let me feel alone, crumble under his mother's gaze. We should go, he mumbled. If you walk out that door, I said quietly, don't come back. He paused, hand on the doorknob. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the Ryan I'd fallen in love with. Then Evelyn touched his arm, and it vanished. I'm sorry, he whispered and followed his mother out. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by their abandoned papers, feeling an odd sense of déjà vu. Once again, I was watching someone choose to leave. But this time, I wasn't the scared little girl clutching a teddy bear. This time, I was choosing to. My phone buzzed, a text from Zoe. You okay? I looked around the kitchen at the life Ryan and I had built and the ruins Evelyn had made of it. No, I typed back. But I will be. Then I started gathering evidence for my lawyer. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. After all, I was my mother's daughter, and she taught me how to fight back. 1 year later, I was sorting through the last box from my old house when my phone lit up with a familiar number. Ryan. I watched it ring, remembering the last time I'd seen him in court 6 months ago, when the judge ordered him and Evelyn to repay the money they'd taken from my accounts. You should answer it, Zoe said from her spot on my new couch. After everything, she'd helped me find this small but sunny apartment across town. Get closure or whatever. I picked up on the final ring. Hello. Harper. Ryan's voice was rough, unfamiliar. I need your help. Of course he did. The lawsuit had revealed the extent of Evelyn's deception. Decades of hidden debt, mortgages on mortgages. Credit cards maxed out to maintain their facade of wealth. Last I'd heard, They'd lost everything. I'm sorry, I said, surprising myself by meaning it. But I can't. Please. Moms. She's not handling things well. We're staying in this motel, and… Stop. I closed my eyes, remembering my mother's voice. We bend but never break. You made your choice, Ryan. I know. I know I messed up. But you're the only one who understands about family. No, I interrupted. I understand about strength. About standing on your own 2 feet. That's what real family taught me. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he whispered, I miss you. I miss who you were, I replied. But that person's gone. After hanging up, I reached into the box I'd been sorting, the last one from my old life. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was my mother's jewelry box. I'd avoided opening it since her death, but something compelled me now. Among the modest pieces she'd owned, I found an envelope I'd never seen before. Inside was a letter, dated just weeks before she died. My dearest Harper, if you're reading this, you've finally decided to face what's in this box. You always were brave like that, facing things head-on, even when it hurt. I need to tell you something about your father. The police found more than just that receipt from Oregon. They found letters, dozens of them, to another family he'd abandoned before us. It seems running away was his pattern. But that's not your pattern, Harper. You stay. You fight. You build something real from the ruins others leave behind. Whatever life throws at you, remember, your worth isn't measured by who stays or goes. It's measured by how you carry yourself through the storm. All my love, Mom. I traced her handwriting, feeling pieces click into place. My father hadn't just abandoned us. We were part of a pattern, a chain of destruction he'd left in his wake. But Mom had broken that pattern by staying, by showing me a different kind of strength. You okay? Zoe asked, watching me carefully. I looked around my new apartment, smaller than my old house, but paid for with honest work. On the wall hung my financial analyst certification, earned while rebuilding my credit after Ryan's betrayal. The coffee table held brochures for the financial literacy program I'd started, helping other women escape financially abusive relationships. Yeah, I said, tucking Mom's letter into my journal. I really am. My phone buzzed again, Ryan's number. This time, I didn't hesitate. Block contact. Some might call it revenge, letting Ryan and Evelyn face the consequences of their choices. But sitting there, surrounded by the life I'd built from scratch, I realized it wasn't about revenge at all. It was about breaking patterns, the pattern of abandonment my father set, the pattern of control Evelyn wielded, the pattern of dependency Ryan chose. I picked up my mother's locket, the one I'd worn at my wedding, and fastened it around my neck. Inside were 2 pictures now, Mom on one side, and on the other, a photo of me at my program's first graduation ceremony, helping other women find their strength. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better.
I'm Caroline, and I was raised in what could be considered a typical household. Believe me when I say that the way things transpired was everything from typical. I was the second violin in my parents' orchestra from the day I was born. Tom, my older brother, was their favorite and their golden kid. They had high hopes for him, believing he would take over and grow our family's Chinese porcelain company. Me, I was only present. Tom received all of the latest technology, all of the attention, and all of the accolades. The most recent iPhone, it was Tom's. The most recent gaming system, Tom's awesome invitation to a party, Tom is leaving. Me? If I received a babysitter for the night or any of Tom's hand-me-downs, I was lucky. Don't misunderstand me. I didn't despise Tom or my parents. They were simply incomprehensible to me. They were constantly striving to be more important, wiser, or wealthy than they actually were. With them, looks were everything. At family get-togethers, Mom would hiss, "Caroline, get up straight. And for heaven's sake, be happy. What are people going to think?" I would put on a false grin and wait for the opportunity to sneak away to my room. My mom's parents, my grandparents, were the sole bright light in all of this. It was like entering another planet when you visited them, since they resided in a comfortable, small house across town. I felt liked and seen with them. I felt like I could only be who I really was there. Tom had a great to-do when he graduated from high school. My parents proudly announced that Tom would be entering a prestigious institution they had handpicked for him, arranged a big party, and invited all of their key friends. Our boy is making great progress. Dad gave Tom a pat on the back and boasted, "The family will be proud of him." I stayed at home while Tom went to college. After several years, I looked into colleges and chose a curriculum that I was enthusiastic about. Telling my folks was all I needed to do. I plucked up the guts to approach them at breakfast the following day. I added, trembling slightly, "Mom, Dad, I've chosen the college I want to go to." They gave me the impression that I had sprouted a second head. "University?" Dad laughed. "You." Mom's high-pitched, false chuckle made my teeth tense. "Oh, Caroline, stop being so dumb. College is not necessary for you. We'll have you work in the shop." "But I'd like to learn." Dad interrupted me before I could finish. He firmly stated, "We're not wasting money on your education. Tom is using that money to buy a new car." I was stunned into stillness as I stood there. Then Mom struck the last blow. "Face it, Caroline," she murmured, smiling condescendingly but not rudely. "You're simply not cut out for college. In the store, you'll be considerably happier." It seemed as though someone had hit me in the stomach. To them, all of my efforts and goals were in vain. With tears running down my cheeks, I fled the room and called my grandparents, the only thing that came to me. I was crying so hard that I was having trouble speaking. "They said I'm not," Grandma remarked. "Suitable for college." Into the phone, I wept. There was stillness for a while. Then Grandpa's harsh, irate voice could be heard on the line. "Caroline, pack your luggage. We are on our way to collect you." My parents barged into my room an hour later as I was packing clothing into a suitcase. "What are you doing, in your opinion?" Mom insisted. With a weak but resolute voice, I declared, "I'm leaving." Dad laughed. "Avoid being absurd. Where would you go?" The doorbell rang at that moment. I felt a sense of comfort as I heard Grandpa's loud voice below. "She's accompanying us." Grandpa remarked, coming into my doorway with Grandma at his heels. "Now give it a minute." Dad began, but Grandpa interrupted. "Caroline is 18. He snarled, "She can live anywhere she damn well pleases. And she enjoys living with us at the moment." I was already dragging my bag down the stairs when Mom made an attempt to dispute. I saw my childhood house vanish in the rearview mirror as we drove away. I expected to feel depressed, but instead I felt liberated. During a home-cooked meal that evening, my grandparents presented their strategy. Grandma reached for my hand and murmured, "We've been saving for years. Caroline, we always knew you were meant to be great. We would want to cover your education expenses." Suddenly, my life was altered. Ready to take on any challenge, I enrolled at the college of my dreams. Without fail, a little sum of money would show up in my account each month for lodging. "We believe in you" was usually written on the note. Late hours in the library, contentious class discussions, and projects that tested me in ways I had never experienced before were all examples of how passionately I put myself into my studies. I thoroughly enjoyed it. My professor once took me aside after I finished a particularly challenging project. Her normally severe expression broke into a rare grin as she continued, "Caroline, I'm impressed. How would you feel about working as a summer intern at Stellar Corp?" My mouth fell open. Stellar Corp. The city's most prominent business was Stellar Corp. Everyone wanted to work there. "Are you serious?" I stammered. She nodded. I'm recommending you personally. Don't let me down." I practically floated out of the classroom. Meet Caroline, the girl who was not college material, landing an internship at Stellar Corp. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The future was wide open, and I was ready to grab it with both hands. I was in my 3rd year of college when the unexpected call came. My older brother Tom had already graduated and landed a job. He'd been bragging about some big promotion, and now my parents, who had hardly spoken to me in years, suddenly wanted me to come home to share in Tom's success. I spent the next few days debating whether to go. Part of me wanted to stay away to protect the life I built for myself, but another part wondered, maybe things had changed. Maybe they finally saw me differently. In the end, I decided to go. What's the worst that could happen, right? I arrived at my old house on Friday evening, feeling like a stranger as I walked up the familiar driveway. Mom answered the door, all smiles and air kisses. I just finished unpacking when I heard the front door open and Tom's voice drift up the stairs. "Mom, Dad, we're here." Curious, I headed downstairs. Tom was standing in the living room, his arm around a pretty blonde girl I'd never seen before. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Sarah," Tom announced, beaming, my fiancée. Mom let out a squeal that could have shattered glass, while Dad pumped Tom's hand enthusiastically. I stood on the sidelines, feeling like an outsider at a party I hadn't been invited to. "It's nice to meet you," I said to Sarah, who smiled warmly at me. "You must be Caroline. Tom's told me so much about you." I doubted that, but I appreciated the effort. As we all sat down, the story came out. Tom and Sarah had been dating all through college, and now that they'd graduated, they decided to tie the knot. "So Sarah," Mom said, leaning forward eagerly, "tell us about your family. What do your parents do?" Sarah smiled. "Oh, they're in business. They own a chain of high-end boutiques across the country." I swear I could see dollar signs light up in my parents' eyes. Dad puffed up like a peacock. "Well, we're thrilled to welcome you to the family," he declared. "Now about the wedding. I think we should spare no expense. In fact, I'd be happy to cover half the cost myself." I nearly choked on my drink. Half the wedding costs. This from the man who wouldn't spend a dime on my college education. "That's very generous," Sarah said, looking a bit uncomfortable. "But really, there's no need." "Nonsense," Dad boomed. "We want this to be the event of the season. Nothing but the best for my son and his bride." I caught Tom's eye across the room. He looked embarrassed, uncomfortable. It was hard to tell. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. As the evening wore on, the wedding plans grew more and more extravagant. A 5-star venue, gourmet catering, designer dresses. My parents were going all out to impress Sarah's family. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of raised voices downstairs. Groaning, I dragged myself out of bed and crept down the stairs, curious about what new drama was unfolding. Tom and Sarah were standing in the living room, a sleek folder in Sarah's hands. My parents sat on the couch, looking confused. "What do you mean, another city?" Dad was saying, his face turning an alarming shade of red. Sarah opened the folder, revealing glossy photos of a stunning beach resort. "We've always dreamed of a destination wedding," she explained, her voice excited. "Look at this place. It's perfect." I watched as my father's eyes bulged at the price list Sarah handed him. This is ridiculous," he spluttered. "It's 3 times what we discussed." "But Dad," Tom argued, "you said you wanted the best." "This is the best." Dad stood up, his fists clenched. "I meant the best in our hometown, where our friends can attend. Who's going to travel across the country for your wedding? Our friends will, Sarah said softly, looking hurt. The argument escalated quickly. Dad insisted on a local wedding, while Tom and Sarah stood their ground on the destination plan. I stood in the corner, feeling like I was watching a tennis match, my head swaggling back and forth between the two sides. Finally, Dad exploded. Enough. It's either a wedding here the way I wanted, or you're on your own. The room fell silent. Tom's face hardened, a look I'd never seen before. Fine, he said coldly. We'll do it on our own. With that, he grabbed Sarah's hand and stormed out, slamming the door behind them. Dad collapsed onto the couch, his face in his hands. Mom fluttered around him, murmuring soothing words. I stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do. I'm going to head back to college, I said quietly. Neither of them responded. I packed my bags and left, grateful to escape the tension-filled house. Back at college, I threw myself into my studies, trying to forget the family drama. Weeks turned into months, and life went on. I was deep into my final project when I got the call that changed everything. Is this Caroline Thompson? A formal voice asked. Yes, that's me. I replied, my heart racing. This is Mr. Johnson from Johnson Associates Law Firm. I'm afraid I have some bad news. Your grandparents, Robert and Margaret Thompson, were in a car accident 3 days ago. I'm sorry to inform you that they didn't survive. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My grandparents gone, it couldn't be true. They were the only ones who had ever truly believed in me, supported me. Now, Miss Thompson, the lawyer's voice brought me back to reality. There's something else we need to discuss. Your grandparents' will. I listened in a daze as Mr. Johnson explained that I was the sole beneficiary. My grandparents had left me everything. Their cozy house, their savings, everything. I sat on my bed after the call ended, trying to process it all. Grief for my grandparents wed with disbelief over my inheritance. I was now the owner of a house and had a substantial amount of money in the bank. The dust had barely settled on my grandparents' funeral when the vultures started circling. I was still trying to process my grief when Tom showed up at my door, all smiles and fraternal love. Caroline, sis, he exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that felt about as genuine as a $3 bill. How you holding up? I stepped back, eyeing him wearily. I'm managing. What are you doing here? Tom sauntered into my apartment like he owned the place, making himself comfortable on my couch. Well, I heard about Grandma and Grandpa's will. That's quite a windfall you got there, huh? And there it was. I crossed my arms, already knowing where this was heading. Look, Caroline, Tom said, his voice taking on that wheeling tone I knew all too well. Sarah and I are still trying to put together our dream wedding. And now that you've come into some money. I cut him off. No, Tom, I'm not paying for your wedding. His face fell, then hardened. Come on, Caroline, don't be selfish. It's not like you earned that money. We all know you were just sucking up to them to get their money. The accusation hit me like a slap in the face. How dare you? I hissed. I loved them. They were the only ones who ever believed in me. Yeah, because you played them like a fiddle. Tom was on his feet now, shouting. Poor little Caroline, so neglected. Give me a break. At least I'm not a spoiled brat who thinks the world owes him a fancy wedding. I shot back, and we went back and forth, hurling accusations and old grickerolinances at each other. Years of resentment and hurt came pouring out. By the time Tom stormed out, slamming the door behind him, I was shaking with anger and hurt. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, my phone exploded with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Apparently, my parents had been busy. How could you be so selfish, Caroline? Your poor brother just wants a nice wedding. I always knew you were trouble. The messages went on and on. I called my parents, demanding an explanation. Well, what did you expect? Mom sniffed. Refusing to help your own brother? It's shameful. You didn't want to pay for his ridiculous wedding either. I reminded her, that's different. Dad chimed in, we're his parents. You're just being greedy with your inheritance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Greedy? I worked my ass off in college while you two showered Tom with everything he wanted. Watch your language, young lady, Mom scolded. This is exactly why we always preferred Tom. He knows how to behave in polite society. Over the next few weeks, the family divide grew wider. Invitations to family events stopped coming. My cousins unfriended me on social media. It was like I'd been erased from the family tree overnight. At first, it hurt a lot, but as the days went by, I started to feel relieved. No more pretending. No more walking on eggshells. No more feeling like the family disappointment. I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor. I had 1 semester left, and I was determined to graduate with honors. My grandparents had believed in me and had given me this amazing gift. I wasn't about to let them down. The day I graduated from college should have been one of the happiest of my life. Instead, I felt empty. There was no one in the audience cheering for me, no proud parents taking photos, no celebratory dinner afterwards. I collected my diploma and went home alone. The next few weeks were a blur of job applications and interviews. I was determined to make something of myself, to prove to everyone, especially myself, that I was worth something. Then out of the blue, my phone buzzed with a message from Tom. I nearly dropped it in shock. Hey Caroline, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I'm getting married next month. It would mean a lot if you could come. Call me. I stared at the message for a long time before finally hitting the call button. Caroline. Tom's voice was hesitant. Thanks for calling. Look, I messed up. I've been thinking a lot about how I treated you, how we all treated you. I was a spoiled brat, and I'm sorry. I was stunned into silence. You're my sister, Caroline, he continued. You and our whole family. You're important to me. I want everyone there for my big day. Please say you'll come. I felt a lump in my throat. I'll think about it, I managed to say before hanging up. The day of the wedding arrived, and I found myself standing outside an elegant hotel, clutching an expensive gift, and feeling like I was about to walk into the lion's den. The venue was stunning, flowers everywhere, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. For a moment, I felt underdressed in my simple cocktail dress. I spotted Tom across the room, looking dashing in his tuxedo. Taking a deep breath, I made my way over to him. Congratulations, I said, forcing a smile. Tom's face lit up. Caroline, you came. He pulled me into a hug, and for a moment, I let myself believe that everything might be okay. We chatted for a few minutes, and I started to relax. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Then I saw them. Mom and Dad making their grand entrance. Mom was dripping in jewelry. Dad in a tux that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. They swept into the room like royalty, greeting guests with air kisses and condescending smiles. Oh, darling, my son's wedding is just divine. I overheard Mom saying to another guest. Of course, we spared no expense. Only the best for our Tom. I had to stifle a laugh. Same old Mom and Dad, always putting on a show. As the evening wore on, I did my best to avoid them, sticking to the edges of the room and making small talk with distant relatives who didn't seem to remember our falling out. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, the way Mom kept glancing at me. the hushed conversations that stopped when I walked by. It was like waiting for the other shoe to drop. The evening was in full swing when Dad clinked his glass, calling for everyone's attention. "It's time for the family toast," he announced, beaming with pride. My stomach dropped. I hadn't prepared anything, but before I could protest, Mom was dragging me toward the stage. I stumbled after my parents, feeling like a lamb being led to slaughter. Dad started the speech, his voice thick with emotion. "Tom, Sarah, we couldn't be prouder. Your love is an inspiration to us." Mom chimed in. "We've always been a close-knit family, supporting each other through thick and thin." I stood there, trying to keep a neutral expression, wondering what alternate reality they were living in. Then Dad dropped the bomb. "In fact, we love Tom so much that we took out a substantial loan to pay for this beautiful wedding." Wait, what? I thought they'd refused to pay for the destination wedding, but Dad wasn't finished. "Of course we won't be paying back that loan ourselves. No, our wonderful daughter Caroline has generously offered to cover it." I stammered. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I felt all the blood drain from my face as every eye in the room turned to me. What? I stammered, my voice echoing through the microphone. There must be some mistake. I never agreed to that. Mom's hand clamped down on my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. "Smile and agree, dear," she hissed through clenched teeth. But I was done playing along. I wrenched my arm free and stepped up to the microphone. "I'm sorry, but this is the first time hearing about any loan. I never agreed to pay for Tom's wedding." The room erupted into shocked whispers. I saw Tom and Sarah exchanging panicked glances. "Caroline, darling," Mom said, her voice sickly sweet as she tried to salvage the situation, "don't be modest. We all know how generous you are with your inheritance." That was the last straw. "Generous? You mean the inheritance you all tried to guilt me out of? The one you said I didn't deserve?" Dad tried to grab the microphone, but I held on tight. "I'm sorry, but I won't be paying for this wedding. I wasn't even consulted about it." "You ungrateful little bastard." Dad snarled, forgetting the microphone was still on. His words echoed through the ballroom, causing several guests to gasp. Mom's carefully cultivated mask of politeness crumbled. "We should have thrown you out on the street years ago. You're worthless. You hear me? Worthless." I stood there, shock and hurt warring inside me. Then a calm settled over me. Without another word, I handed the microphone to the wide-eyed DJ and walked off the stage. As I made my way through the stunned crowd, I heard my parents' voices behind me, alternating between apologies to the guests and more insults hurled at my back. I made it to my car before the tears started. As I drove home, my phone exploded with messages, some supportive, most accusatory. I blocked them all. At home, I double-locked the door and sank to the floor, my mind reeling. Had this all been a setup? Had Tom's apology just been a ploy to get me to pay for his wedding? I felt sick, betrayed, angry. But underneath it all, there was a small spark of relief. The mask had finally come off. There was no more pretending, no more hoping for a family that clearly didn't want me. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My eyes were puffy from crying, and my head pounded with the mother of all headaches. I was contemplating spending the entire day in bed when there was a knock at the door. Peering through the peephole, I was shocked to see Tom standing there, looking as rough as I felt. "Caroline, please," he called through the door. "I've been trying to reach you all night. Can we talk?" Part of me wanted to tell him to go to hell, but curiosity won out. I opened the door a crack, eyeing him warily. "What do you want, Tom?" He held up his hands in surrender. "To apologize and explain. Please, can I come in?" Against my better judgment, I let him in. We sat at my small kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee between us like a peace offering. I swear to you, Caroline, I had no idea about Mom and Dad's plan. Tom began, his voice thick with emotion. When you stormed out, I confronted them. It was ugly. I snorted. Yeah, I bet. No, you don't understand, Tom insisted. Sarah and I, we never asked them for money. We were paying for the wedding ourselves. This whole loan thing was all their idea. They wanted to look good in front of Sarah's family. I felt a weight lift off my chest. So you didn't set me up? God no, Caroline. I meant what I said before the wedding. I want to make things right between us. As Tom talked, I saw a side of him I'd never seen before. He told me how Sarah had opened his eyes to how dysfunctional our family was, how our parents treated their children with love and respect, not as pawns in some social climbing game. Sarah's parents are loaded, Tom said with a wry smile, but you'd never know it. They're the most down-to-earth people I've ever met. When they heard what happened, they offered to pay off Mom and Dad's loan. What? No, they are unable to accomplish it. I objected. Tom extended his hand. Don't be concerned. I'm going to reimburse them in full. However, they wanted to do this for us, to give us a fresh start free from the drama of our parents. Tears began to form in my eyes, but they weren't tears of annoyance or rage for once. Now what? I inquired. Tom grabbed my hand from across the table. We now begin over as a true family. Caroline, Sarah, and I want you in our life without any conditions. For what seemed like the first time in our lives, we really chatted for hours on end. I thought I had my brother back by the time Tom departed. The months that followed flew by. I threw myself into my work with a zeal I never realized I possessed after landing a position at a marketing business. Tom and Sarah became frequent visitors to my home for movie evenings or dinners. Tom and Sarah arrived at my door with identical smiles one bright afternoon. We have some news. I'm practically bouncing with excitement, Sarah added. You will become an aunt. With a shriek, I gathered them both into an embrace. I couldn't help but be amazed at how much had changed as we celebrated. When our parents learned about the baby, they attempted to re-enter our life, but Tom and I refused to back down. We had had enough of their theatrics and trickery. Although separating from them wasn't easy, we now have each other, and sometimes the family you select is more resilient than the one you were born into. My name is Sandra, and I was raised in a large household. They repeatedly tried since Dad was determined to have a son. Before the physicians eventually took action, Mom became pregnant repeatedly. No more, the group said. It's too risky. At that point, Mom and Dad decided to give up on their boy-loving ideal. I had to do a lot of grunt labor because I was the eldest. Please understand that although I adored my sisters, there were moments when I felt more like a parent than a sibling. I have to mature quickly, you know. I was washing laundry, changing diapers, and assisting Mom with all household chores while the other children were playing outside. With the birth of my younger sister, everything drastically altered. It seemed as though Mom and Dad had just realized they were parents. They purchased her the nicest toys, lavished her with attention, and enrolled her in every club and activity imaginable. She got what she desired. When I was around 14, I once heard my mother on the phone. I just don't have time for the older girls anymore, she stated. However, Sandra is managing it. She is an excellent assistant. Assisting? I was relegated to the status of an assistant, not a sister or even a daughter. My grandma, Mom's mother, was my secret, though, and it kept me going. I was able to get her phone number, and we had been communicating covertly since they had a major argument years ago. I began to fantasize of college as I grew older. Being the babysitter for the family wasn't all I wanted for myself. However, my parents gave me a shocking revelation when I graduated from high school. Dad remarked, "There's no money for your education, Sandra," without even meeting my gaze. "You must get employment and provide financial support. We must put money aside for your sister's schooling." I sobbed myself to sleep that night because I felt helpless and stuck. But then I thought of Grandma, my hidden weapon. I contacted her the following day, and in between sobbing, told her everything. She added, "Don't you worry, sweetheart," in a stern and strong voice. "I'll cover your college expenses. You want to have the opportunity to live a better life." Suddenly, I found myself in a whole other universe. In search of a new beginning, I sent applications to universities in various cities. I was ecstatic to be admitted to study economics. My parents, however, didn't think so. "You're leaving your family behind," Mom said, her eyes icy. "After everything we've done for you." Done for me, what I was hearing was unbelievable. "I've been raising your kids since I was a kid myself." Dad shouted, "Get out," in a quiet, angry voice. "Go if you intend to. However, don't count on our assistance." That evening, while my sisters watched with teary eyes, I packed my luggage. They begged, "Don't go, Kathy." I told them, "I have to," and gave them all a firm embrace. "But I'll be here for you no matter what. Always." "Girls, you are not to have any contact with Sandra," Dad said behind me as I left the house. "Do you get it?" I felt like I could finally breathe as I got used to college life. There was a lot of activity on campus, and for once, I just had to worry about myself. However, while accepting this new chapter, I was still plagued with guilt. I really missed my sisters. I couldn't handle the idea of severing all contact with my parents, even if they were banned. I received a call one evening from an unidentified number. As I responded, my heart pounded. My second youngest sister said, "Kathy," in a voice that was almost audible. "Emily, is that you?" I was so excited that I could barely control myself. "Yes, it's me. My friend's phone is being used by me. Dad and Mom can't find out." We caught up on everything over the course of many hours that evening. Emily told me how our parents had become stricter, how things had changed at home, and how much everyone, even Sarah, missed me. In reference to our younger sister, I inquired. The person on the other end paused. "Sarah?" "Kathy, she's different," she informed me. "Mom and Dad learned that we had called you. They confiscated our phones. But don't worry, we'll figure out how to stay in contact. We cherish you, Kathy." Those covert calls ended up becoming my lifeline. With the exception of Sarah, my sisters would contact me via the phones of their pals. We would discuss their goals and lifestyles, and I would tell them about my time in college. It was something, but it wasn't the same as being there. I put myself into my studies in the interim. I was really interested in economics, and I was doing quite well in my lessons. My professors took notice, and soon I was being recommended for internships and special projects. As my college years flew by, I couldn't help but think about my family back home. I'd hear snippets from my sisters about how Sarah was still the golden child, how she was in all these clubs, and always the center of attention. Mom and Dad are talking about sending her to some fancy private school. My sister Jessica told me during one of our secret calls. "What about you and Emily?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Oh, Jessica said, trying to sound nonchalant. "We'll probably just go to the local high school. It's fine, really." But I knew it wasn't fine. I knew how it felt to be overlooked, to be treated like you didn't matter as much. It broke my heart that my sisters were going through the same thing. As graduation approached, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I'd done well in college, thanks in no small part to my grandmother's support. She'd been my rock through it all, always there with a kind word or a bit of advice when I needed it. "I'm so proud of you, Sandra," she told me over the phone one night. "You've overcome so much. Your grandfather would have been proud too." On the day of my graduation, I scanned the crowd, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents and sisters would be there. But they weren't. The only familiar face in the sea of people was my grandmother, beaming with pride. Fresh out of college, I hit the ground running. The job was challenging, but I thrived on it. Months flew by, and I settled into a routine. Work, gym, home, repeat. It wasn't exciting, but it was mine. I was building my own life on my own terms. Then came the company's annual corporate party. I almost didn't go. Large gatherings still made me a bit uncomfortable, but my colleague Jen insisted. "Come on, Sandra," she pleaded. "It'll be fun. Plus, I heard some bigwigs from our partner companies will be there. A great networking opportunity." The party was in full swing when I arrived. Soft jazz played in the background as people mingled, drinks in hand. I was about to make a beeline for the punch bowl when I quite literally bumped into someone. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I stammered, looking up to see a pair of kind brown eyes. "No harm done," the man said with a warm smile. "I'm Michael, by the way. I don't think we've met." "Sandra," I replied, shaking his hand. "I'm from the economics department." We got to talking, and I learned that Michael was an executive from one of our partner companies. He was smart, funny, and easy to talk to. Before I knew it, hours had passed. As the party wound down, Michael asked for my number. "I'd love to continue this conversation over coffee sometime," he said. I hesitated for a moment, then thought, why not? I'd spent so much of my life taking care of others. Maybe it was time to let someone take care of me for a change. Our first date turned into a second, then a third. Before I knew it, we were officially a couple. Michael was everything I'd never known I wanted, kind, supportive, and he actually listened when I talked. A year later, he proposed to me. As we started planning the wedding, I faced a dilemma. Should I invite my family? Despite everything, they were still my parents, my sisters. After much thought, I sent the invitations to my parents, to all my sisters, even Sarah. I also sent one to my grandmother, the one person who had always been there for me. Weeks passed, and I heard nothing from my parents or sisters. Then one day, I got a call from Emily Cathy. She said, her voice trembling, "We got your invitation. Mom and Dad, they won't let us come. They won't even let us send you a card. I'm so sorry." The day of the wedding arrived. As I stood in front of the mirror in my white dress, I felt a mix of joy and sadness. My grandmother walked in, her eyes shining with tears. "Oh, Sandra," she said, hugging me tight. "You look beautiful. I'm so proud of you." As I walked down the aisle towards Michael, I saw the faces of our friends, his family, and my grandmother. My family wasn't there, but I realized something important. Family isn't always about blood. It's about love, support, and acceptance. The years after our wedding flew by in a whirlwind of love, laughter, and shared dreams. Michael and I settled into our life together, both of us continuing to work and build our careers. We traveled, explored new hobbies together, and talked endlessly about our future. Then we decided to start trying for a baby. Months passed, then a year, then two. Nothing happened. We went through all the tests, tried every recommendation, but still no baby. It was heartbreaking. The next few years were a roller coaster of hope and disappointment. We went through treatment after treatment, each failure hitting us harder than the last. One day, after another failed round of IVF, I broke down. Maybe we're not meant to be parents, I sobbed into Michael's chest. He held me tight, stroking my hair. Hey, look at me, he said gently. We're going to be parents. Maybe not in the way we originally thought, but we will be. What do you think about adoption? A child is a child, Sandra. All they need is love, and we've got plenty of that. His words warmed my heart, and I felt a glimmer of hope. Okay, I said, wiping my tears. Let's do it. The adoption process was long and often frustrating. There were so many forms to fill out, interviews to go through, and home studies to pass. But we persevered, driven by our desire to give a child a loving home. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we got the call. The day we met Lily was one I'll never forget. She was tiny, with big brown eyes and skin darker than ours. She looked scared and confused, clinging to her social worker's hand. I knelt down to her level. Hi, Lily, I said softly. I'm Sandra, and this is Michael. We've been waiting a long time to meet you. She looked at us wearily, then back at her social worker, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, Lily reached out and took my hand. At that moment, I fell in love. This was our daughter. I didn't care that she didn't look like us or share our DNA. She was ours, and we were hers. When Lily was about 5, we sat her down and explained in simple terms how she came to be our daughter. We showed her pictures from the day we met her and told her how much we'd wanted her, how we'd fallen in love with her the moment we saw her. Lily listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. When we finished, she was quiet for a moment. So you picked me? She asked finally. I smiled, tears in my eyes. Yes, sweetheart. Out of all the children in the world, we picked you, and we'd pick you again every single time. She beamed at us, then threw her arms around us both. I love you, Mommy and Daddy, she said. As I held my daughter close, I thought about my own childhood. The pain, the neglect, the feeling of never being good enough. I vowed then and there that Lily would never feel that way. She would always know how loved and wanted she was. Life has a funny way of bringing you full circle. One day, Michael said his company had opened a branch in my hometown, and he would become the head of this branch. The move was chaotic, as moves tend to be, but as we settled into our new home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to reach out to my sisters. My parents had passed away a few years back. I hadn't gone to the funeral, but my sisters, maybe it was time to mend those fences. I reached out to Jessica and Emily first. They were cautious at first, but eager to reconnect. We met for coffee, and it was like no time had passed at all. They shared pictures of Lily and told me about their own families, their kids. We've missed you so much, Kathy, Emily said, squeezing my hand. We're so glad you're back. For a while, everything was perfect. We started having family gatherings and holiday celebrations. Lily was thrilled to have cousins to play with, and I loved seeing her surrounded by family. But then there was Sarah, our youngest sister. From the moment we reconnected, I could tell she hadn't changed much. She was still the spoiled, entitled girl she'd always been, now grown into a woman who thought the world revolved around her and her family. At our first big family gathering, Sarah showed up with her husband and their son, Tommy. From the moment they arrived, it was clear that Sarah saw this as a competition rather than a reunion. Tommy, show your aunties how well you can sing, she'd say, pushing her son forward. He's taking lessons, you know. The teacher says he's a prodigy. As the party went on, I noticed Lily hanging back, looking uncomfortable. She approached Tommy, holding out a piece of candy. Want to share? She asked shyly. Before Tommy could respond, Sarah swooped in. Tommy, don't take that, she screeched. Throw it away. Her hands are dirty. I was across the room in an instant. Sarah, what are you talking about? Lily's hands are clean. But Sarah just glared at me, then at Lily. Well, you never know with her kind, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Come on, Tommy, let's go play with your real cousins. I stood there shocked and hurt. Did she really just say that about my daughter? From that moment on, things were tense. Sarah made it clear at every gathering that she didn't consider Lily part of the family. She loudly proclaimed that Tommy couldn't play with Lily because who knows what diseases she might have, or we don't know her genetic background. Each time, I'd confront her, defend my daughter, but the damage was being done. I could see Lily withdrawing, becoming quieter at these family events. One day, I made a decision. I wouldn't force Lily to attend these gatherings anymore. I started declining invitations, making excuses. Jessica and Emily understood, even though they were disappointed. As the dust settled from our move and the family drama that ensued, I found solace in my visits to Grandma. She had been my rock through everything, and now in her twilight years, I wanted to be there for her as much as she had been for me. Every weekend, Lily and I would make the short drive to Grandma's house. She would be waiting on the porch, her face lighting up as soon as she saw us. There's my girl, she'd call out, arms outstretched. Lily would race up the steps, throwing herself into Grandma's embrace. Grandma, I missed you. Watching them together always warmed my heart. Grandma doted on Lily, showering her with love and attention. She never once treated Lily differently because she was adopted. To Grandma, Lily was family, plain and simple. As the months passed, Grandma's health began to decline. Our visits became less about long talks and more about quiet companionship. Lily would read to her or show her drawings she made. Even in her weakened state, Grandma's love for us showed through. The day Grandma passed was one of the hardest of my life. We'd been there with her at the end, holding her hand as she slipped away peacefully. Lily, wise beyond her years, had climbed onto the bed and curled up next to her great-grandmother. It's okay, Grandma, she'd whispered. You can rest now. We'll love you. In the days that followed, as we dealt with our grief and the logistics that come with losing a loved one, we received some unexpected news. Grandma's lawyer called, asking us to come to his office. Your grandmother left a will, he explained. When we arrived, well, you might want to sit down for this, he said. What he told us next left me speechless. Grandma had left everything to me and Lily. The house, several cars, and over $1 million. Your grandfather was quite successful, the lawyer explained, and your grandmother was an astute investor. She had intended to leave it all to your mother despite their estrangement. But when your mother passed, I nodded, understanding. Grandma had changed her will, leaving everything to us. When word got out about the inheritance, my phone started ringing off the hook. Jessica and Emily called to congratulate me, saying I deserved it. But then came the call I'd been dreading. Sarah, Sandra said, her voice sickly sweet. I heard about Grandma's will. So when are you sharing the inheritance with the rest of us? I felt a flash of anger. After everything she'd said and done, how dare she? I'm not, I said firmly. The inheritance is for me and Lily. That's what Grandma wanted. But that's not fair, Sarah screeched. I'm family too. I deserve. I cut her off. No, Sarah, you don't. Goodbye, and I hung up. As I put down the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For so long, I tried to please everyone, to be the perfect daughter and sister. But now I realized it was time to put my own family first. It was Jessica's birthday, and despite my reservations, I decided it was time to make an appearance at a family gathering. When we arrived, the party was in full swing. Jessica's backyard was filled with laughter and chatter. Kids ran around playing tag while adults mingled, drinks in hand. For a moment, it felt like old times. Jessica embraced me warmly. "I'm so glad you came, Kathy," she whispered. I could see the genuine happiness in her eyes. For the first hour or so, everything was fine. Lily joined her cousins on the lawn, their laughter floating across the yard. I relaxed a bit, thinking maybe this wasn't such a bad idea after all. But then I saw Sarah. She was moving from child to child, whispering in their ears. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I saw the way the kids' eyes widened, the way they glanced at Lily. Suddenly, Lily was standing alone. The other children had moved away, forming their own group, pointedly excluding her. I watched as my daughter's face crumpled in confusion and hurt. Before I could react, Lily ran to me, tears streaming down her face. "Mommy," she sobbed, "they don't want to play with me anymore. They said I'm sick and not really family." Rage boiled up inside me. I hugged Lily close and then marched over to Sarah, who was watching the scene with a smug smile. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. Sarah's smile didn't falter. "Oh, calm down, Sandra. I'm just telling the children the truth. They deserve to know about her condition." "Condition?" I spat. "The only person with a condition here is you, Sarah. Your behavior is disgusting." By now, we'd drawn a crowd. The other adults were watching, wide-eyed, as the confrontation unfolded. Sarah's face twisted into an ugly smear. "My behavior? That's rich coming from you, Sandra. You who shamelessly took Grandma's money, robbing the rest of us of our rightful inheritance. And for what? To give money to that girl who isn't even really part of this family." Gasps echoed around us. "How dare you?" I seethed. "Lily is my daughter. She is as much a part of this family as anyone else." Sarah laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Family? She's not even related to us. She's just some random kid you picked up, probably born to drug addicts or criminals. She has no right to our family's legacy." I was shaking with fury now. "You don't know anything about Lily or her birth parents, and it doesn't matter. She is my daughter, and I love her more than anything in this world." "Love?" Sarah sneered. "Is that what you call it when you use a child to steal from your own family? Face it, Sandra, you're nothing but a thief using that girl to get Grandma's money. Well, we won't stand for it anymore. It's time you shared what rightfully belongs to all of us." I was about to respond when Jessica stepped forward, her face set in determination. "That's enough, Sarah," she said firmly. "You have no right to speak to Sandra like that or to treat Lily this way." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "What? You're taking her side?" Emily joined Jessica, standing beside me. "We both are. Sandra has always been there for us, even when our own parents weren't. She raised us, Sarah. She deserves every penny of that inheritance." I felt a lump form in my throat, touched by my sister's support. Sarah's face contorted with rage. "You traitors! How dare you? You're betraying the memory of our parents." Emily scoffed. "Our parents? The same parents who neglected us and showered you with attention. The same parents who cut Sandra off for daring to want an education." Jessica gave a nod. "Not to mention how you stole Mom and Dad's home and all of their money when they passed away, Sarah. You didn't give any of us a dime of it." This revelation was fresh to me, and I gasped. "What? Sarah, is that accurate?" Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water as her face became pale. "It's true," said Emily. "She got everything when Mom and Dad passed, and she never once offered to share." I felt a surge of fury and disillusionment. Sarah had been accusing me of stealing all along, even though she had done the exact same thing herself. "Sarah," I stated firmly and steadily, "I believe it's time for you to go." She said, "You can't make me." But Jessica interrupted. "She can indeed. I want you to go. This is my house. We're all sick of your outbursts and your meanness. You're not welcome here until you can show respect for Sandra and Lily." Sarah realized she was outnumbered as she glanced around. She took her son's hand and walked off after giving him one more scowl. I felt a burden leave my shoulders as the gate slammed behind her. With tears in my eyes, I turned to face my sisters. "Thank you," I said in a whisper. I decided later that evening. I informed my sisters of my idea over the phone the next day. They protested that I didn't have to, but I persisted. I kept the million for our family and gave them the house and the cars. I experienced a wave of calm when the inheritance was resolved. I made sure Lily will always be taken care of by transferring half of the money to a trust fund for her future. Michael and I made the decision to use the other half for our family. We would go to Disney World, which Lily had been fantasizing about. We would remodel our house to make it the ideal setting for our small family. Additionally, we would consider adopting a second kid to give Lily the sibling she has always desired. Like Dad, I can still picture the paint flaking off as I sat on our old, creaky porch steps, eager to get out. He had wheels beneath his feet and a heart too huge for any map, according to Mom. When the police arrived that day and reported that Dad's truck had been discovered, abandoned on the side of some forgotten roadway, I finally understood what that meant. At the age of 7, I clung to my mother's skirt, feeling the weight of her silent tears, even though I didn't fully comprehend them. But Jane Mom was a warrior. She worked extra shifts at the neighborhood cafe without Dad. She would frequently arrive home late, attempting to be quiet but never quite succeeding, and I would often fall asleep to the sound. When I was around 12 years old, I asked her one evening, "Mom, why do you work so much? Are you not worn out?" Her eyes were sweet yet exhausted as she sat next to me. "We need to make ends meet, Ella. We're tougher than life, aren't we?" I nodded, happy to be strong like Mom, even if I didn't really understand. When I was 18, Mom was diagnosed with cancer, which was a devastating blow. She put up a fierce fight, but it was like using a spoon to stop the flood. She died gently, leaving me with a pile of debts and a few memories. My desire, my escape, was to be college. For the first year, I was able to make ends meet, but after that, I was on my own. I balanced 2 or even 3 jobs with my classes, anything that paid. I recall crying on one really trying night at the university library. Surrounded by volumes that seemed as heavy as the world on my shoulders, I was by myself. I met John at that time. His eyes were worried as he approached. "Hey, are you okay?" I was ashamed and wiped my eyes. "Yeah, just college stuff." A bit hesitantly, he grinned. "I understand. By the way, my name is John." "Ella," I said, forcing a little grin. That was the beginning with John. He was different, kind and dependable, like a rock in my choppy sea. He didn't have much, but he gave me all he had, including his old, worn laptop, notes from classes, and a half sandwich. Sometimes we would sit together and converse, and other times we would simply sit in quiet. It was secure and cozy. Since Mom was here, I hadn't had that emotion. "You're the strongest person I know, Ella," John once said. "I have no doubt that you will succeed." I gave a little sour laugh. Powerful. I feel as though I'm barely surviving. That's what being strong is about, isn't it? He said, hanging on even when it's the last thing you want to do. I gave him a serious look and saw that he was correct. With or without wheels under my feet, I knew I would survive because I was strong, just like Mom. Those elegant brochures were not representative of college life. It was challenging, rough, and put you to the test in ways you never would have imagined. My stomach was in knots as I waited in line at the financial aid office during my sophomore year. I was treated like a number by the woman behind the counter. Next, she yelled without raising her gaze. I started to say, "Hey, I'm here about my scholarship renewal," when she interrupted. There is nothing I can do if it isn't refreshed in the system. Next. Feeling a mixture of powerlessness and rage, I left. I ran across John once more at that point. He would constantly show up when I least expected him to. His brows were wrinkled in worry as he said, "Hey, Ella, everything okay?" I gave a head shake. No, not at all. A dead end is financial aid. It appears like I may have to leave school. John was silent for a while. That's difficult, but keep going. You're more intelligent than half of these academics. Despite the darkness, I laughed. I'm grateful, John. I simply am not sure what to do. Let's get coffee, please. My reward. You may fill me in on everything. That cup of coffee became many more. At college, John became my go-to person. He had a knack for making issues appear more manageable and smaller. I would try not to get overwhelmed by my own concerns when we sat in the cafeteria, him with his boundless optimism. You know, Ella, you should start looking for a job on campus, he suggested one day. Perhaps it will assist with the financial condition. I gave an eye roll. You don't believe I've tried. Everyone seems to be trying to harm me or something. John leaned closer. Not all of them. I've heard that the library is trying to find someone. You might as well be compensated for being there all the time. I considered it. Maybe, but what if they say no? After that, we discover something else. Ella, you're not alone in this. That's how I ended up working at the library. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid some bills. Between stacking books and serving coffees at a local cafe, I barely had time for studies, but I was making it work one day at a time. John and I grew closer. He wasn't just the guy who bought me coffee anymore. He was my friend, my confidant. He knew about my mom, my dad, and all the messy bits in between. It was one evening, while closing up the library, that John said something that stuck with me. Ella, you're going to make something of yourself. I just know it, and I'll be here cheering you on. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. Thanks, John. That means a lot. College was tough, but with John by my side, it felt like I had a fighting chance. He was more than a friend. He was a reminder that some good still existed in this crazy, mixed-up world. After college, life took a turn I didn't expect. John and I got married. It wasn't some big fairy tale wedding, just a small courthouse due with a few friends and little fanfare. We moved into this tiny apartment that had more cracks than walls, but it was ours. It felt like a fresh start, a new chapter. Then came the problem. John's mom, Mrs. Smith. The woman was a piece of work. The first time she visited our place, her nose wrinkled like she'd walked into a dumpster. "This is where you live," she said, her voice dripping with something that was half disbelief, half disgust. I tried to smile. "Yeah, it's not much, but we're happy." She snorted. "Happy? John, you can do better than this. And what about kids? You can't raise kids in this. This." John cut in, trying to ease the tension. "Mom, we've talked about this. We're not rushing into kids. We're focusing on our careers right now." But she wouldn't have it. Every visit was a new complaint. The apartment's too small. The neighborhood's not good enough. Why isn't Ella cooking more? It went on and on. One evening after she left, I turned to John, frustration boiling over. Doesn't it bother you the way your mom talks about our life? John, ever the peacemaker, shrugged. She's just worried about us. That's how she shows love, I guess. That's not love, John. That's criticism. There's a difference. He didn't say much after that. It was like he couldn't see what was so clear to me. His mom's words were chipping away at us bit by bit. Things got worse when she started hinting we should move somewhere better. I lost it one day. John, we can't afford some fancy place. Why doesn't she get that? John looked uncomfortable. She just wants the best for us, Ella. Maybe we could look at some other apartments, just to keep her quiet. Keep her quiet, John? When are you going to stand up to her? We're married. This is our life, not hers. He didn't have an answer. That silence said more than any words could. So we kept living our life in our tiny apartment with Mrs. Smith's disapproval hanging over us like a bad smell. I loved John, but his inability to stand up to his mom was driving a wedge between us. It was like he was still her little boy, not a grown man, married and making his own way in the world. As time marched on, so did our lives, but in different directions. I landed a job at a marketing firm. It was demanding as hell, but I loved it. I was climbing the ladder, making something of myself. John, on the other hand, was stuck in the same old job, a manager at a local retail store. He seemed okay with it, but I couldn't understand why he didn't want more. One night, I came home late, exhausted but buzzing from a successful project. John was on the couch, glued to some TV show. I flopped down beside him. You won't believe the day I had. We landed the big account. John grunted. That's great, Ella. I frowned, looking for some enthusiasm. Aren't you happy for me? He turned, a bit annoyed. Of course I am. It's all you ever talk about. Work, work, work. I sat up, stung. Well, sorry for being passionate about my career. What do you want me to do? Be like you, satisfied with just getting by. He shot up. What's that supposed to mean? It means, why don't you want more, John? Why are you content just being this? He didn't answer, just stormed off to bed. I stayed on the couch, fuming and hurt. The tension spilled over into everything. Even simple conversations turned into minefields. Then came the day when John dropped a bombshell. He wanted us to move to a bigger place, something more befitting our status. I stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Befitting our status? John, we can't afford a fancy place. We're doing fine here. He was insistent. But we can't live like this forever, Ella, and my mom keeps saying. I cut him off. Oh, so it's your mom again. When are you going to stop listening to her and start living for us? John's face turned red. I'm thinking about our future, Ella. Maybe you should too. That hurt. It felt like he didn't see all the hard work I was putting into building that future. It was like we were on different planets. In the end, we did move to a house that cost us a whopping $12,000 a month. I could afford it, but it was a stretch. John seemed happier, but every time I wrote that rent check, I felt a part of me scream in protest. We were living in a house that was too big, with a gap between us that was growing wider. I lay awake most nights, wondering how we got here. Was it the money, the jobs, or had we just changed too much? Just when I thought things couldn't get more strained between John and me, life threw a curveball. John's dad fell seriously ill. It hit John hard. They were close. Overnight, our already fragile routine got upended. One evening, after a particularly rough visit to the hospital, John slumped into a chair, looking like the world was on his shoulders. "Dad's not doing good, Ella. The doctors, they say he needs constant care." I sat beside him, trying to be the supportive wife. "I'm so sorry, John. Maybe we can get a nurse to help." He shook his head, his eyes distant. "No, I've been thinking. I'm going to take care of him. I'll quit my job and move in for a while." I was stunned. "Quit your job, John? Are you sure? What about our bills, the rent for this place?" He snapped. "This isn't about money, Ella. It's my dad. I need to be there for him." I understood. I really did, but the practical side of me was screaming. "And I get that, John, but we need to think this through. We can find another way to help your dad." He wouldn't budge. "No, my mind's made up. I'm doing this." So he did. John moved into his parents' place, leaving me alone in our big empty house. Days turned into weeks. I was juggling my job and all our bills while he was. I don't even know what. Every time I called or visited, it was the same scene. John either glued to his phone or the TV, looking exhausted and frustrated. His mom, Mrs. Smith, was always hovering, throwing in her 2 cents. One day, I found him sprawled on the couch, a beer in hand, eyes glued to some game. "John, shouldn't you be with your dad?" He barely glanced at me. "He's sleeping." "What do you want me to do? Sit and stare at him?" I bit back my frustration. "You could look for a part-time job, help out with our expenses." That got his attention. He sat up, angry. "Really, Ella? You want me to work now, while my dad's lying there, dying?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "We're drowning in bills, John. I can't handle everything on my own." His mom walked in then, always perfect timing. "Ella, John is doing a noble thing, taking care of his father. You should be grateful." Grateful? The word hit me like a slap. Grateful I'm keeping our lives afloat while he sits here doing what? Playing caretaker while watching TV and drinking? John stood up, towering over me. "You just don't get it, do you? This is family. Maybe if you had one, you'd understand." That cut deep. Too deep. I walked out, the sound of his mom's tut-tuts chasing me. I drove home, tears blurring my vision. This wasn't the man I married. This was a stranger, living a life I didn't sign up for. The days after John's father passed were tough. I expected things might start to shift back to normal, but they never did. John never went back to work. Instead, he spent more and more time at his mom's place, leaving me alone in our big, expensive house, drowning in bills and loneliness. One evening, I came home from work to find John and his mother, Mrs. Smith, sitting in the living room. The air was thick with tension. I could tell something was up. "Ella, we need to talk," John said, not even bothering to look at me. I set my bag down, feeling a knot in my stomach. "What's going on?" Mrs. Smith, who always had too much to say, started. "We've decided it's best if John and I live here. We can take care of the rent now." I was shocked. "What? This is our home, John. You can't just kick me out." John finally looked at me, his eyes cold. "It's not working, Ella. You and me, this life. I need to start over, and Mom needs a place to stay." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Start over? So you're just going to throw away our marriage just like that?" He shrugged. "It's been over for a while, hasn't it? We're just making it official now." I turned to his mother. "And you? You think you can just come in here and take over my life?" Mrs. Smith stood up, her voice sharp. "It's for the best, Ella. You and John were never a good match. He needs to be with family now." I was seething. "Family? What about me? I'm his wife." John stood up, facing me. "Not anymore. We want you out, Ella. The sooner the better." I looked between them, the betrayal cutting deep. "Fine, I'll go. But don't think for a second that this is okay. You're both making a huge mistake." I packed a bag with my essentials, my hand shaking with rage, and heard as I walked out the door. John's voice followed me. "We're doing what needs to be done, Ella. You'll see, this is for the best." Settling into my new, modest apartment felt like a fresh start. It was small, but it was a place where I could finally breathe, away from the stifling atmosphere of my past life with John and his overbearing mother. The walls were bare and the furniture was minimal, a stark contrast to the lavishness I'd left behind. As I was arranging my few belongings, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an old mutual friend of John and me, Laura. "Hey, Ella. Have you heard about John and his mom? They're living it up. Expensive clothes, fancy gadgets. Wonder where all that money is coming from." I stared at the screen, a mix of curiosity and bitterness swirling in me. Where were they getting the money? I thought back to the expensive house, the bills, and the lifestyle they had insisted on. It didn't add up. Shaking my head, I typed a quick reply. "No idea, Laura. Good for them, I guess." But the question gnawed at me. I couldn't help but wonder how they were affording such extravagance, especially after kicking me out, and with John not working. A few days later, I ran into another friend, Mike, at the grocery store. He brought it up again. "Ella, you won't believe it. Saw John and his mom at the high-end electronics store, buying like there's no tomorrow. Heard they even sold their family home. Crazy, huh?" I forced a smile. Yeah, crazy, but inside, my mind was racing. They sold the family home. Was that where the money was coming from? As I unpacked groceries in my kitchen, a small, unadorned space that was now my refuge, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I was moving on, building my life again from scratch, while they seemed to be living in a world of luxury built on what? Lies? Deceit? I sat down at my tiny dining table, a second-hand purchase, and let out a long breath. It didn't matter, I told myself. I was out of that toxic environment, free from their twisted dynamics. But deep down, I knew the truth. It did bother me. It bothered me that they seemed to be thriving after throwing me to the curb. I had worked hard for everything I had, while they seemed to be enjoying a life of ease and comfort. As the evening wore on, I found solace in the quiet of my apartment. It was mine, earned through my own effort and resilience. I had lost much, but I had gained something more valuable. My independence, my sense of self. 4 months into my new life, the past came knocking in a way I never expected. My phone rang one lazy Saturday morning, the caller ID flashing John's name. I hesitated but answered. "Ella, we need your help." John's voice was shaky, desperate. I sat up, alert. "What's happened, John?" "It's all gone wrong. We got kicked out of the rental house. Mom and we have nowhere to go." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Kicked out? But I thought you had money." A pause occurred. "Ella, the money is gone." His voice drifted off. Dad left debts, not inheritance, as we thought. I experienced a range of feelings, including shock, incredulity, and a slight sense of fulfillment. Were they genuinely wealthy all along, anticipating a substantial inheritance? Really, even for my ex-husband, it was too much. "So what do you want from me, John?" "We were wondering if maybe we could stay with you, just for a while, until we sort things out." I let out a brief, sour laugh. "Do you wish to remain with me? After everything?" Now John's voice was begging. "Please, Ella. There is nowhere else for us to go. Do you recall the happy times? Why don't we just? I interrupted him. Have fun, John. I was kicked out of my own house by you and your mother. Now when things are hard, you can't just crawl back. After a brief period of silence, Ella, I realize I made a mistake. I apologize. We're simply in extreme need. Having made up my mind, I inhaled deeply. I've moved on, John. You and your mother have no place in the new life I've created. You must solve this problem on your own. But Ella, no, John, it's finished. You made your decision. Accept it. With my heart racing, I hung up. I had a wave of empowerment accompanied with a slight melancholy. I had left the world I had known behind. And now John, the guy I had once loved, was only a voice on the other end of the phone. Lara phoned me later. John and his mother were mentioned to me. Are you all right? With a smile, I felt at ease. Yes, I'm doing ok. I am genuinely liberated, Lara. I glanced about my tiny apartment, my haven, as I hung up the phone. Although it was so different from my life with John, it was real. I owned it. I had persevered through the worst and emerged stronger. That night, I came to the realization that this was my new beginning. A life in which I was in charge, and my happiness was independent of other people. Although I had lost a lot, I had also discovered who I was. This is the tale of how my family disintegrated, and my name is Kimberly. It all began when my younger brother, Tommy, was 5 and I was 7 years old. Mom had taken Tommy to his first actual piano lesson, and I can still clearly recall the day. She was virtually floating on air when they returned. "Kim, come here," she said, her voice full of enthusiasm. Wondering what all the commotion was about, I rushed down the stairs. Your brother is a genius in music. Although I wasn't really sure what that signified, I could tell it was significant. That's fantastic, I answered, attempting to seem excited. With gleaming eyes, Mom said, "The teacher says he has perfect pitch." Are you aware of how uncommon that is? I have no doubt that he will become a star. It was all about Tommy after that day. In order to concentrate on his profession, Mom abandoned her part-time employment. She would spend hours looking into kid-friendly talent events and music competitions. Our living room became a miniature recording studio, furnished with a microphone, keyboard, and even a tiny karaoke machine. Do not misunderstand, Tommy was good. His voice was clean and pure, like that of a tiny angel when he sang. However, I couldn't help but feel excluded. Mom was too preoccupied with Tommy's possible celebrity status, and Dad wasn't really there. He would go to work before I was up and return home after I had gone to bed. He was too tired to do much else on the weekends, so he would watch TV or tinker in the garage. I therefore learned how to look after myself. I would prepare my own meals, do my assignments without being questioned, and make an effort to keep my troubles to myself. But it wasn't all awful. I had my grandmother, my books, and a few close pals. Mom's mother was Grandma, but they couldn't have been more unlike. Grandma was grounded and pragmatic, but Mom was all about the limelight and celebrity. When I was 12, I began helping out at her little convenience shop in town after school. She would smile at me over her spectacles and remark, "Kimberly, you're a good worker." Astute financial management will benefit you throughout your life. I valued those remarks more than all the ambiguous compliments I received at home. At least someone recognized me as more than simply Tommy's sister. In relation to Tommy, he was flourishing while being cared for by Mom. He had already won a couple local singing contests by the time he was 7 years old. Mom's face would light up with joy when she brought his awards and accolades home. Without waiting for a response, she would ask me, "Did you see Tommy on TV last night? He was the most gifted child the judges had seen in years," they remarked. I tried to be pleased for my brother by smiling and nodding, but when I saw how differently we were treated, I couldn't help but feel jealous. While I had to save my money for months in order to purchase whatever I wanted, Tommy had access to the newest toys and technology. The gap between Tommy and me widened even further once I started high school. Mom put Tommy in an exclusive private school renowned for its music department, while I went to the neighborhood public school. Taking care of his outfit and reminding him about his voice lessons after school, she would drop him off every morning in our rickety minivan. In the meanwhile, I would have already boarded the early bus and would be halfway to school. When I returned home one day from an especially demanding day of studies and a shift at Grandma's store, Mom and Tommy were seated at the kitchen table, surrounded by flyers and brochures. "What is all of this?" I put my backpack down beside the door and asked. Mom's eyes gleamed with anticipation as she glanced up. "You won't believe it, Kim. Tommy received a call to try out for the National Youth Corps. New York is where the audition is held. We'll have to reserve a hotel, airfare, and new clothes." The question that kept coming to me was, can we afford all that? Mom's smile wavered briefly. "We'll get by. We must take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime chance for Tommy." Knowing better than to argue, I nodded. However, I couldn't help but think as I made my way to my room. What about my opportunities? In a sense, I felt proud of Tommy rather than envious of his skill. However, I had had enough of being treated like an outsider in my own family. I overheard Mom and Dad fighting in their bedroom that evening. I could tell it was about money, even though their voices were muted. Dad was saying, "Linda, we're already in debt. We cannot continue to spend in this manner." However, Mom felt that this may be Tommy's big break. You don't want him to be successful. Dad groaned, "I do, of course, but what about Kim? Nothing has been set aside for her education fund." After a moment, Mom's now softer voice said, "Kim is smart. She'll get scholarships. In addition, she has always been self-sufficient. She will find a solution." Their remarks reverberated in my mind as I laid in bed and stared at the ceiling. She will find a solution. It always came down to that, didn't it? They threw everything into Tommy's future, leaving me to fend for myself. The next day, I went to work at Grandma's store. As I was restocking shelves, Grandma called me over to the counter. "Kimberly," she said, her voice gentle, "is everything all right? You seem distracted today." I hesitated for a moment, then the whole story came spilling out. Tommy's audition, the money problems, my fears about college. Grandma listened patiently, her face growing more concerned with each word. When I finished, she shook her head. "Listen, I've been thinking. You're a hard worker, Kimberly. How would you like to start earning a real wage here at the store? Not just pocket money, but something you could save for your future." For the first time in a long while, I felt seen and appreciated. As I hugged my grandmother, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could create my own opportunities. I didn't need to wait for someone else to invest in my future. With Grandma's help, I could start investing in myself. As the years went by, I threw myself into my studies and my work at Grandma's store. By the time I was 15, I'd managed to save up a decent amount. My goal? A laptop for school. One Friday afternoon, I decided to count my savings. I went to my closet and pulled out the pink ceramic piggy bank Grandma had given me years ago. But when I shook it, something felt off. The familiar jingle of coins was missing. My heart racing, I opened the bottom and turned it over. Nothing. Not a single coin fell out. With shaking hands, I made my way downstairs. Tommy was sprawled on the couch, playing video games on a shiny new console. "Hey, Tommy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You haven't seen my piggy bank, have you? Or the money inside it?" He barely glanced up from his game. "Nope, sorry." I took a deep breath and headed to the kitchen, where Mom was preparing dinner. "Mom," I began, "did you take the money from my piggy bank?" She turned to me, her face calm. "Oh, that. Yes, I did. Tommy needed a new game console. His old one broke, and he was so upset. I knew you had some savings, so I took it." I stood there, speechless. Tears were threatening to spill, but I refused to let them fall. "When will you pay me back?" I managed to ask. Mom sighed as if I was being unreasonable. "We'll see. Times are tight right now with all of Tommy's expenses. You understand, don't you? This is an investment in his future." I didn't understand. I couldn't understand how she could do this to me. Without another word, I turned and ran out of the house. I kept running until I reached Grandma's store, tears blurring my vision. Grandma took one look at me and flipped the open sign to closed. She led me to the back room and sat me down. "What happened, Kimberly?" she asked gently. Between sobs, I told her everything. As I spoke, I watched Grandma's face change from concern to disbelief to anger. "What am I going to do, Grandma?" I asked, feeling more lost than ever. I can't trust them. Grandma was quiet for a moment, then she stood up. "Wait here," she said. She disappeared into the front of the store. When she came back, she was carrying a laptop box. "I was saving this for your birthday," she said, placing the box in my lap. "But I think you need it now. Just don't take this home. Keep it here at the store. Use it after your shifts or on weekends. I don't want your mother getting her hands on this too." That night, as I lay in bed, I made a promise to myself. I would never let anyone take advantage of me like that again. I would work harder, save more, and find a way out of this house where I felt like a stranger. My 16th birthday rolled around with little fanfare. Mom remembered the date this time at least. She and Dad wished me a happy birthday over breakfast, Dad sliding a card across the table before rushing off to work. I invited a few close friends. We set up some folding tables in the backyard, strung up some lights, and had a pretty good time. I'd saved up from my job at Grandma's store to buy snacks and drinks. My best friend Rachel helped me decorate with balloons and streamers we got from the dollar store. As we sat around eating chips and laughing about school drama, I caught myself feeling genuinely happy. For a moment, I could forget about the family dynamics and just be a normal teenager celebrating her birthday. But reality has a way of creeping back in. When Tommy's 16th birthday came around 2 years later, it was an extravaganza. They rented out the fanciest restaurant in town, invited what seemed like half the city, and even hired a professional photographer. The cherry on top, a shiny new car parked outside with a big red bow. I stood off to the side during the party, watching Tommy beam as he accepted congratulations and gifts. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to resent him. This wasn't his fault. He was just living the life our parents, especially Mom, had orchestrated for him. A few months later, I was thrilled to learn I'd been accepted to study economics at a college in the next state. Even better, I'd earned a partial scholarship. But as I soon discovered, partial was the operative word. The scholarship wouldn't cover all my expenses. With trepidation, I approached my parents one evening. "Mom, Dad," I got into State University for economics. I have a scholarship, but I'll need some help with the rest of the tuition and living expenses. Dad looked up from his newspaper, a crease between his brows. "That's great news about the scholarship, Kim, but you know money's tight right now with Tommy's music school fees." Mom jumped in. Kimberly, you're a smart girl. I'm sure you can figure something out. Maybe get a job. You've always been so independent. Defeated, I retreated to my room. As I sat on my bed, staring at the acceptance letter, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Grandma, asking how the conversation with my parents went. I called her back, my voice shaking as I recounted what had happened. Grandma listened quietly, then said, "Kimberly, don't you worry. We'll figure this out together." True to her word, Grandma set up a college fund for me. Between that, my scholarship, and a part-time job, I picked up at a cafe near campus. I managed to make it work. "You're going to do great things," Kimberly, Grandma said. "I'm so proud of you." Those words carried me through the tough times in college when I was up late studying or pulling double shifts at the cafe. If I'd remember Grandma's faith in me, I would push through. I called Tommy occasionally, trying to keep our connection alive. He was at a prestigious music college, all expenses paid by our parents, of course. Despite the differences in our situations, it was nice to hear his voice and to know that at least one person in that house might be missing me. After 4 grueling years of balancing studies, work, and tight budgets, I finally graduated with my degree in economics. Armed with my hard-earned qualifications and a determination to succeed, I returned to my hometown. It wasn't long before I landed a job at a prestigious financial firm and found a small but comfortable apartment to rent. Life settled into a pleasant routine. Work was challenging but rewarding. In my free time, I started to build a life for myself outside of my family's shadow. I made new friends, took up hiking on weekends, and even started dating a bit. Then one rainy Tuesday evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my mother standing there, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. She stepped inside, wringing her hands. "Kimberly, I need your help." Those words sent a chill down my spine. In all my years, I couldn't remember my mother ever asking for my help. "What's wrong?" I asked, leading her to the couch. She sat down heavily, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm sick, Kim, really sick. The doctors say I need treatment, but our insurance won't cover it all." My heart dropped. Despite everything, she was still my mother. "How much do you need?" $15,000, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know it's a lot, but I didn't know where else to turn. Your father and I, we spent everything on Tommy's education. We thought it would pay off by now, but... The next morning, we drove to the bank in silence. As we waited in line, Mom started talking, her voice low. "You know Tommy's doing so well," she said. "He's got offers from several big music groups. Once he signs, we'll be able to pay you back in no time." I nodded, only half listening. My mind was racing, thinking about how I'd manage the loan repayments on top of my rent and other expenses. After signing what felt like a mountain of paperwork, I transferred the $15,000 to my mother's account. As we left the bank, she hugged me tightly. A few days later, I was scrolling through my social media feed during my lunch break when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was Tommy, my brother, posting selfies from the Swiss Alps. She called me every day, her voice a soothing bee to my frayed nerves. "Don't you pay any mind to those fools," she'd say firmly. "They don't know the half of what's been going on in that house all these years." A week after my mother's posts went viral, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years, my father's. "I've been seeing your mother's posts," he began, and I braced myself for the criticism. But then he surprised me. "I want to hear your side of the story, the full story." So I told him everything. The years of feeling overlooked, the incident with my piggy bank, the struggles through college, and finally, the loan and the betrayal that led to the lawsuit. There was a long silence when I finished. Then, to my shock, my father's voice came back thick with emotion. "I had no idea," he said quietly. "Kimberly, I'm so sorry I failed you as a father. I followed your mother's lead for too long. I told myself I was providing for the family by working long hours, but the truth is I was running away from the problems at home. I should have been there for you." Tears were streaming down my face now. This was the most open, honest conversation I'd had with my father in, well, ever. "I've got a lot to make up for," he said. "I know that, but if you're willing, I'd like to try to be the father I should have been all along." As we continued to talk, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a parent in my corner. It wasn't going to fix everything overnight, but it was a start. After our heart-to-heart, Dad decided to take a closer look at the family finances, something he admitted he should have done years ago. He found that Mom had been secretly withdrawing money from their joint account for years, funneling it all into Tommy's career. But that wasn't the worst of it. She'd taken out multiple loans in both their names, all to fund Tommy's pursuits. They were drowning in debt, and Dad had been completely in the dark. The confrontation that followed was explosive. I wasn't there, but I heard about it from the neighbors. There was shouting, the sound of dishes shattering, and finally, the arrival of police cars. In the aftermath, Dad filed for divorce. The proceedings were messy, but in the end, Mom got half of everything, which went straight to paying off her mountain of debt. I maintained my distance from Mom, focusing on rebuilding my relationship with Dad and cherishing the unwavering support of Grandma. Life started to feel normal. Then, about a year after the divorce, Mom's triumphant posts started appearing on social media again. Tommy had graduated from his music college and landed a spot in a famous band. Her captions were full of "I told you so's" and thinly veiled jabs at Dad and me. Some people couldn't see the potential, she wrote, but a mother always knows. Who's laughing now? I made an effort to ignore it. I had recently paid a down payment on my own apartment, was doing well at work, and felt like I was finally on firm ground. Dad was also doing better than I had ever seen him, appearing happier and more at ease. However, life has a tendency of surprising you with unexpected turns. Tommy returned to Switzerland 2 years after his great break. Videos of him partying with his bandmates and glitzy photos of the Alps were all over his social media accounts. In an attempt to show his admirers his vocal range in the freezing air, he then made the decision to record himself singing at the summit of a mountain one frosty morning. It was a catastrophe. He had a bad cold that turned into a dangerous infection of the throat. The harm was done even with the greatest medical attention. Tommy was no longer able to sing. Mom was devastated by the news. Later, her neighbors informed me that they heard yelling and the noises of objects being tossed and shattered coming from her home. They discovered her in complete hysterics when they went to see how she was doing. She continued talking about missed opportunities and dashed hopes, and she didn't recognize anyone. They were forced to call for assistance. A mental health hospital accepted Mom. According to the physicians, she had a major nervous breakdown that had been made worse by years of stress. Tommy, on the other hand, became depressed and resorted to drinking. We weren't sure whether he would survive for months, but with Dad's and my help, he gradually began to improve. In a surprising turn of events, he became sober and applied to colleges to teach music. "I can't sing anymore," he stated to me while drinking coffee. "But maybe I can help other kids who love music do it right, without all the pressure and crazy expectations." I was filled with pride for my little brother. "I think that's a great idea, Tommy." I thought back on the turbulent voyage of the previous several years as I drove home that evening. I considered Tommy discovering a new route, Dad being at last free to pursue his own life. Mom being stuck at the institution, confined in a world she had created, and me. I had defended my position, stood up for what was right, and emerged from the experience stronger.